First of all, as in 1997, Korea recovered very rapidly from the 2008 crisis. We see a huge drop in output in the final quarter of 2008, and that reflects Korea's dependence, reliance on exports, followed by a strong recovery in 2009. And this expansion has continued, although we see it slowing down again in 2012 with the world economy experiencing some difficulties. This recovery was led by exports and industrial production. Many countries in the OECD, including Japan, have not recovered their 2008 peaks for production and exports, but Korea recovered by 2009 as it continued to grow. And the strong export growth was supported by a weak won. As Professor Ito mentioned, the fall was especially sharp versus the Japanese yen, which is very important for certain exporters in Korea. So the economy is in the midst of a recovery that is ongoing. But looking ahead, Korea faces 5 important challenges I'd like to briefly talk about. First, regarding women, the key factor in my view is the problem of labor market dualism. When a woman leaves the labor force for marriage or childbirth and they want to come back, they usually face the option of non-regular work. And that's not very attractive given the low wage and the precariousness of non-regular work. The second issue is childcare. And of course, the government's doing many things on this. Even as we speak, things seem to be happening. Work-life balance is very important. As I mentioned, long working hours make it hard to have 2 parents working in the same household. And the questions of maternity leave and child care leave are also important. On the issue of older workers, I think we need to move away from mandatory retirement. Many workers even leave well before the mandatory age, and because companies are anxious to get rid of them because the steep seniority wage profile makes them unprofitable. So as they get older, their productivity starts to level off or even go down while the wage keeps going up. So we need to move away from seniority-based wages towards performance-based wages. First of all, there's the issue of trying to level the playing field. Manufacturing has traditionally benefited from certain advantages, lower tax rates, lower electricity rates, and it's time to make the playing field level between manufacturing and services. We need to strengthen competition. It's a question of entry barriers, regulatory reform, competition policy, and also reducing barriers to trade and FDI. In terms of FDI, Korea is a relatively closed economy. FDI, the stock of FDI is 13% of Korea's GDP. That's the 3rd lowest in the OECD. If you look at the service sector, the stock of inward FDI is only 6% of GDP. The OECD average is 37%. So having more foreign direct investment in services is one way to have more competition and higher productivity. And finally, we need to address the problem of SMEs who are predominantly located in the service sector. And over time, we've seen more and more government assistance given to the SMEs, more and more loan guarantees, more and more subsidies. But nevertheless, the performance of SMEs has tended to deteriorate. And the first is labor market dualism. In Korea, this is kind of hard to see perhaps, but about 1/3 of employees are non-regular workers. That means they have little employment protection. That means their wages on average are only 57% as much as regular workers. So this creates inequality in the Korean economy, in the Korean society. So social spending is very important, especially for certain groups like the elderly, but it's an area we need to be cautious. Korea has managed to maintain a low level of debt, about 33% of GDP, compared to the OECD averages now is 100%. And it's very important that Korea keep a strong fiscal position with low government debt, partly because of aging and partly because of the consideration of North Korea. Korea also has low taxes. This is because of low spending, and this low tax rate encourages people to work. People work a lot in Korea partly because they keep what they make. They have a low tax rate. And as spending goes up, we need to avoid the situation in Europe where the tax rate goes up to 40, 50%, and people decide to take more leisure. Let me just finish quickly with green growth, given that Mr. Yang Soo-gil is with us today. I can't finish without talking about green growth. Since 2008, this has been the strategy announced by President Lee Myung-bak. And this presidential committee was established in 2009. And Korea has a target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30% relative to a baseline as usual by 2020. This is an ambitious target, implies a cut of 4%. And fortunately, Korea took the very courageous step of passing an ETS, thanks to the work of Dr. Yang, of passing ETS which will take effect in 2020. And Korea's economic development will depend on how effective and efficient this green growth program is. They've started a program, a 5-year program that spends 2% of GDP, a huge sum of money towards green growth. And this will help determine Korea's economic future as well. Let me just finish with one slide that shows North Korea. This is hanging over everybody's head in terms of, for example, keeping a strong fiscal position. North Korea is half the population of South Korea, but the per capita income in Korea is much, much lower at only about 5%. And this has to be kept in mind as we think about Korea's future. So let me close here, and I look forward to answering any questions later on. Thank you very much.